meet everyone. I'm very excited to be here. I did enjoy the overview of your 501c3 and that you look to create and formulate and provide a venue for discourse, civil discourse. There are a lot of topics to explore in our community, whether it's Tampa, St. Pete, this region, the state of Florida. But as we know, Florida has a great relationship and a steering guidance for the rest of the country, all right? And politics and cuisine and humanity, and that's what we're going to talk about today, humanities, art criticism, philosophy, civic engagement. But let's back up a little bit. When we look at history, we're not necessarily looking at humanities. History is a scholarly examination of a record, okay? But when we explore humanities, we're looking at how we live. We are looking and engaging with how we participate in our society and how that develops. And humanities has a relationship, beauty, that's criticism, that's understanding, that's argument, that's discourse, agreement, religion. All of that plays into how we define humanities, but it's a parameter, right? So let's go back to the classics, and that's what humanities are now. The classics, the Greco-Roman era, Stoicism. And it seems that when we look at Stoicism, you can imagine that it is very linear, and that's by design. There are philosophers that took this parameter, the concept of determinism versus free will, and providing a parameter so that we can think on one accord. Right? Let's exclude all the ugliness, the subjectivity, and get into a discussion about one topic. We understand the parameters, right? Marcus Aurelius is one of the greatest Stoics that examine how you can differentiate yourselves from military engagement versus leading an organization. How are you leading a country? How can you do that as a person that has lives in the balance, as you make a decision on how you engage another country, but also look at government, right? So here we have this upcoming weekend, the football playoffs, right? So let's do an examination of that and we can get to humanities in Florida. Well, you have the NFL or American football versus European football, and so you take it down to maybe the AFC versus NFC, and then the teams you play, right? So we've made a linear focus to talk about just whether or not Tampa beats Dallas or Dallas beats Tampa, right? So that's how we provide this funnel. But when we look at Florida, we can examine cuisine, like who has the best Cuban sandwich, right? Ybor City versus Tampa versus Miami versus St. Petersburg. Where do you find the best cuisine? Well, seafood in Florida versus barbecue in Memphis, Tennessee. We're talking about cuisine, but we provide parameters. That allows us to have an even, level playing field of discourse. If we look at the sensitive topics, and that's what people sometimes run away from. Sensitive topics are off the table, or are they on the table? We can talk about race, religion. We should talk about race and religion and those differences so we can understand our neighbor and where our neighbor is coming from. And we can look at how we can make the best vote in this concept called the social contract of our lives. The government provides us something, and should we provide something back to the government? It's a relationship. There's an expectation. Now, where that expectation rests, that's where the discussion comes up. But at some point, we communicate with the representatives that make the decision. So we need to understand what best reflects the interest of Tampa, St. Petersburg, in our area. So that is how humanities bridges the differences. This comes from the Great Society. Lyndon B. Johnson in the 1960s realized that the United States was not on a level playing field with the other countries and continents around the world, right? So how do we do that? We establish a National Act for Arts and Humanities. We distinguish the difference between arts and humanities because we understand arts examine the aesthetic of how we live, but the criticism of that, what is beauty? What is the best riff on the guitar, right? What is the best element of the recipes that we eat, or what is politics in our lives? When we examine that in an objective lens, the aperture, we provide that concept of cultural versus ethical relativism, then we're talking about humanities. We are able to have a discussion about that. So you have those arguments about critical race theory, whether you can talk about it or not. Well, let's not talk about whether it's good or bad, whether it's appropriate or not. Let's just understand what it is so we can make a good decision about our vote. So, in 1965, the National Endowment for the Humanities was established. And they looked at the United States and determined we can't properly take a step into a community and tell that community how to tell their story, right? So in about 10 years, Florida Humanities and several humanities councils, 501c3s, around the United States and territories, making 56, were established so that federal dollars can be funneled and granted out to nonprofits like this nonprofit that has speakers. And so we curate speakers, we curate exhibition opportunities, we support organizations that help tell the story of our lives within those parameters of humanities. Not just history, not just philosophy, not just music, but whatever resonates with your community. What's beautiful about your community? What needs to be highlighted? What needs to be preserved? We provide you the opportunity to do the good things you do and support your mission. That's humanities in a nutshell. National Endowment for the Humanities in a nutshell. And of course, Florida Humanities, a nonprofit in your backyard, is here to support those organizations. I hope I provided a good overview, and I know you have a lot of questions. My background, as Jenna mentioned, spans the gamut. Art museum, music museum, history museum, artifacts, and now I have the opportunity to engage with the public and see how we can support the good work you do. So now we're open for Q&A.